The 37th session of the Senate, in the third regular session of the 16th Congress, is hereby called to order. Let us all rise for a minute of silent prayer. Thank you. With the permission of the Chamber, we suspend the session for 1 minute. Where is she? Ilan na? Ha? There was one occasion. Sino pa nandyan available? The session is resumed. The Secretary will call the roll.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano Alan Peter Compañero S., Cayetano Pia S., Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Onasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Usmeña, Pimentel, Po, Recto, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Drilon.
14 senators are present. The chair declares the presence of a quorum. The Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the Journal of the 36th Session, Tuesday, November 10, 2015, and consider the same as approved.
Any objection? Hearing none. Carried.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
Secretary will read the reference of business.
Message from the House of Representatives. Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 9 October 2015 it passed the following House bills, in which it requests the concurrence of the Senate. House Number 5844, not granting the Avocado Broadband Telecoms, Inc. a franchise to construct, install, establish, operate, and maintain telecommunication systems throughout the Philippines. House Number 6005, an act granting the Infinivan, Inc. a franchise to construct, install, establish, operate, and maintain telecommunication systems throughout the Philippines. And House Number 6195, entitled An Act Renewing for another 25 years the franchise granted to Satellite Paging Systems Philippines, Inc., presently known as Now Telecom Company, Inc., under Republic Act Number 7301 as amended by RA Number 7940, entitled An Act Granting Satellite Paging Systems Philippines, Inc., a franchise to construct, establish, operate, and maintain radio, paging systems, and trunk radio systems in the Philippines for a period of 25 years and for other purposes.
To the Committee on Public Services.
Bills on first reading. Senate Number 3005, an act to provide surveillance, research, and services aimed at the prevention of birth defects. Senator Defensor Santiago.
Committee on Health and Demography and Finance.
Senate Number 3006, an act to protect consumers by promulgating uniform manufacturing standards for bicycle helmets and promoting its use. Senator Defensor Santiago.
Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship.
Senate Number 3007, an act providing for compulsory psychotechnical driver assessment tests, amending Section 22 of RA 4136, otherwise known as the Land Transportation and Traffic Code. Senator Defensor Santiago.
Public Services, Finance.
Senate Number 3008, an act integrating palliative and hospice care into the Philippine healthcare system by Senator Gingona III.
Health, Demography, Ways and Means, Finance.
Senate Number 3009, an act modifying the compensation and position classification system of civilian government personnel at the base pay schedule of military and uniformed personnel in the government and for other purposes, introduced by Senators Drilon and Legarda.
Civil Service, Government Organization, Professional Regulation, and Finance.
Resolutions. PSR 1655, commending Joe Jenna Jude Martin Hover for being the lone Filipino winner of the NPS Awards this year, Senator Gingona III.
Rules.
PSR 1656, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the reported health hazards of the haze in Mindanao, Senator Defensor Santiago.
Health and demography, environment and natural resources.
PSR 1657, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the report that 86 Lumad families have fled their homes in Agusan del Sur amid attacks from communist rebels, Senator Defensor Santiago.
Justice and human rights, cultural communities.
PSR 1658, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the report that bogus jobs are being offered to Filipinos in Malaysia, Senator Defensor Santiago.
Labor, employment, human resource development.
PSR 1659, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the report that the Bureau of Customs seized 5 tons of undervalued sodium cyanide in Oriental Mindoro, Senator Defensor Santiago.
Ways and means.
PSR 1660, directing the proper Senate committee to conduct an inquiry of legislation on the report that some 151 kilos of dog meat worth millions of pesos were seized from restaurants in Baguio City, Senator Defensor Santiago.
Agriculture and food.
PSR 1661, directing the Committee on Accountability of Public Officers and Investigations Blue Ribbon to investigate in aid of legislation the recent reports of Laglagbala and Tanimbala scam as means of extortion in Philippine airports with the end in view of strengthening laws to curb corruption, Senator Gingona III.
Public services.
Committee
Wait. Public services and Blue Ribbon.
Committee report number 293, submitted by the Committee on Public Services on House number 5591, introduced by Representative Yap S. et al., entitled An Act Extending for a period of 25 years the term of the franchise granted to Tarlac Electric Inc., formerly known as Tarlac Enterprises Inc., to construct, operate, and maintain an electric, light, heat, and power system in the city of Tarlac, province of Tarlac, provided under RA number 7606, recommending its approval with amendment. Sponsor, Senator Osmeña III.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Additional reference of business resolution, PSR 1662, directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the incidents of Laglagbala modus operandi in various Philippine airports with the end in view of instituting immediate disciplinary action of suspension or dismissal after investigation, filing criminal and administrative charges against the responsible officials, instituting real change in the state of security in Philippine airports, and protecting overseas Filipino workers and other Filipino and foreign travelers from any and all extortion, inefficiency, and graft and corrupt practices in our Philippine airport system, introduced by Senator Cayetano A.P.
Public services. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, may we acknowledge some guests in the gallery. We have first-year students of the Universidad de Manila College of Law, headed by Ms. Marijo Gomez.
The students of the Universidad de Manila College of Law, headed by Marie Jo Gomez, we recognize your presence for the record of this afternoon session. We welcome you to the Senate.
Mr. President, we also have students and teachers from the Philippine Science High School, the main campus, headed by Mr. Charles de Guzman.
The students and teachers from the Philippine Science High School, main campus, headed by Charles de Guzman, you are welcome to the Senate. We make your presence of record in this afternoon's session.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we are in receipt of the Conference Committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill 2837 and House Bill 5306 on the National Labor Relations Commission. Copies of the report have been distributed to the senators. With the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider the aforesaid Conference Committee report.
Any objection? Hearing none. Proceed. In order.
Mr. President, may move for recognition to as the acting chair of the Labor Committee to present the bicameral report.
Senator Sani Angara is recognized to submit the bicameral conference committee report.
Mr. President, as a result of the bicameral conference on strengthening the operations of the NLRC last October 20, 2015, I have the honor to submit a copy of the conference committee report with the joint explanation on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill 2837, entitled An Act Strengthening the Operations of the National Labor Relations Commission, amending for this purpose Articles 219 and 221 of Presidential Decree 442 as amended, otherwise known as the Labor Code, and House Bill 5306 entitled An Act Strengthening the Operations of the National Labor Relations Commission, amending for this purpose Articles 213 and 215 of Presidential Decree number 442, otherwise known as the Labor Code of the Philippines, as the sponsorship speech, and consider this read in toto into the record. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none.
Mr. President, I move that we adopt the Conference Committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill 2837 and House Bill 5306 on the National Labor Relations Commission.
Any objection? Hearing none, the bicameral Conference Committee report on the disagreeing provisions of House Bill 5306 and Senate Bill 2837 is hereby approved.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill 2720 under Committee Report 124. This is the bill on the comprehensive nursing law, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that the sponsor delivered his sponsorship speech last May 4, 2015. I thus move that we open the period of interpellations.
Any period for interpellation is in order.
I move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Sani Trillanes.
Senator Trillanes is recognized. Senator Trillanes is recognized on the period of interpellation on Senate Bill 2720.
Mr. President, there are no senators who have registered to interpellate on the measure. Perhaps with the none, the chairman is also indicating that none have registered with him. So, in view of that, I move that we close the period of interpellations on the measure.
Period for interpellation is terminated. Now for the period
I move
of
that we open the period of committee amendments, Mr. President.
period for committee amendments is in order. Senator Trillanes.
Nursing.
There are no committee amendments, Mr. President.
In view of that, Mr. President, I move that we close the period of committee amendments.
Period for committee amendments terminated.
I move that we open the period for individual amendments, Mr. President.
Period for individual amendments is in order. Is there any proposed individual amendment from any of our colleagues, Senator Trillanes?
Yes, Mr. President. There are individual amendments.
Please proceed.
On page 2, section 3, subsection A, line 2.
Page 2,
Page 2,
line.
section 3, subsection A.
Just tell us the line,
Line
please.
2.
Line 2.
Yes.
Yes, please proceed.
Delete the words accredited integrated professional organization and replace it with accredited professional organization. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none.
On page 10, section 22, lines 3 to 13,
Page 10, section 22, lines.
lines 3 to 13,
Yes.
delete the entire section and replace it with, and I quote, section 22 dash accredited professional organization, open close parentheses, APO, dash all nurses whose names appear in the registry book of nurses shall automatically become members of the accredited professional organization, comma, thereof, and shall receive thereto all the benefits and privileges upon payment of APO membership fees and duties, period. Membership in other organizations of nurses shall not be barred, period. Close end of quote. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved. Just a question. Who imposes and who fixes the fees in this particular case? Because all nurses are being required to pay this fee.
The accredited professional organization, as approved by the PRC, Mr. President.
All right. Thank
And
you.
there is another omnibus amendment, Mr. President.
Please proceed.
Every time the words accredited integrated professional organization or the acronym AIPO appear in the bill, replace it with the words accredited professional organization or the acronym APO,
All right.
respectively. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? This is an omnibus amendment. Hearing none.
Mr. President, I move for a 1 minute suspension.
Suspended for 1 minute.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Resume. Session resumed. Yes, Senator Trillanes is once more recognized.
Yes, Mr. President. On page 15, section 38C, line 10, after the word nursing, insert or related disciplines. End
Or
of quote.
related
Or related disciplines, Mr. President.
discipline.
I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none.
On page 3, section 3, lines 23 to 24, delete the sentence starting from the words as such all the way to the word Philippines. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none.
On page 13, section 32, line 9, replace the word implement with the word accredit. I so move, Mr. President.
Approve. Sabi mo sa akin.
That's all, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, there are no other senators who wish to propose individual amendments. I move that we close the period for individual amendments.
Period for individual amendments on Senate Bill 2720 is hereby terminated.
Mr. President, I move that we approve Senate Bill
2720.
2720 under Committee Report 124, the Comprehensive Nursing Law on second reading.
Any objection? Hearing none, Senate Bill number 2720 under Committee Report 124 is hereby approved on second reading.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of the measure.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration of the measure is suspended.
Mr. President, we suspend for 1 minute.
1 minute suspension.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, the chairperson of the Committee on Finance wishes to make a manifestation. Senator Legarda.
Senator Legarda is recognized.
Yes, Mr. President. We have several of our colleagues requesting that this November 16 Monday, which is the start of the sponsorship speeches and the general principles and several agencies' interpellation, be moved to November 23rd Monday. As you recall, in our caucus yesterday, we all agreed that, in fact, I have the schedule of all the agencies due for Monday. I am ready to sponsor on Monday, Mr. President. And we would have routed the committee report on Sunday or Monday morning. There's been a request from both the majority and the minority because of the difficulty in transport and the traffic situation, and considering the staff who may have difficulty accessing the Senate grounds, that the sponsorship of the budget be moved on November 23. So I would like to ask, I asked for a caucus, but the Senate President said that it would be fine to bring it to the floor. So may I ask the decision of the Senate President whether we will have regular session, or does it mean that there will be no session on Monday as well? Because if we will have session anyway, we might as well tackle the budget. So does this mean that we are declaring November 16 a non-session day and therefore no office for the Senate? I would just reiterate, I am ready to sponsor the budget on Monday, November 16. The LBRMO will also be ready with the work because the vice chairs have submitted their committee reports Wednesday and Thursday by tomorrow. We will work here the whole day, Thursday and Friday, and even the weekend. And so I leave it to the better judgment of the leadership if we will continue as scheduled, or due to the difficulty in transport on Monday, we will move the budget schedule to November 23. I leave it to the judgment of it was Senator Soto who brought up the idea, and there were others who concurred with this suggestion of the change in schedule.
Senator Soto was raising his hand. Yes. Chair recognizes him.
Yes, Mr. President, I would like to concur with Senator Legarda, Senator Loren. Simply because this morning I overheard the PNP and the MMDA saying that all the flights starting Monday morning that are coming in that will have the different leaders or delegates of the APEC. When they arrive, all traffic will stop so that they can facilitate the passage, and they will be arriving by the hour. If the traffic will stop, for a simple person like me, with no security, no driver, no escort, how can I arrive here on time? I will not be able to come here because even if they see me and they will let me go, the point of entry, I will not be able to reach the point of entry because of the traffic at that night. If that happens to me, that will happen to all the employees of the Senate, and that is why I will support the proposal and say that I did mention that to the Senator Legarda. I will confirm that, Mr. President.
The chair is inclined to concur with that motion of Senator Legarda. Let us, so that we can cancel our November 16 session because of the circumstances mentioned by Senator Legarda. And therefore, at the appropriate time when we adjourn, the next session will be on November 23 at 9 a.m.
Yes.
Yes, at the appropriate time, we will announce such resumption of the session as indicated.
Thank you, Mr. President. And just to clarify, that all the schedules on November 16 Monday will be moved to Monday at 9 a.m., meaning it will be sponsorship and the agencies that are in your schedule. Per the suggestion of the minority leader, that general principles no longer be discussed, we will therefore go straight to the agencies. What we will do is, if in the event there's a question in general principles at all, we can put them at the last day, which is on the 25th. So we will start with the agencies on the 23rd.
All right.
May we also request that all the subcommittee reports scheduled today be submitted, and the amendments, so we follow the same schedule. We also would request that we need the signatures to file the committee report, so perhaps on Sunday or Monday, we would need to contact all the senators for their signatures for the committee report to be filed.
All right.
So that's it, Mr. President. Thank you.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill 2968 under Committee Report 264. This is on customs modernization and tariff, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, in order.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that we closed the period of interpellation last November 10. I thus move that we open the period of committee amendments.
Committee amendments on Senate Bill 2968 is in order.
Mr. President, I move for recognition to sponsor the measure.
Senator Angara is recognized as his principal sponsor of Senate Bill 2968.
Mr. President, there are no committee amendments. I move that we close the period of committee amendments.
In order. Approved.
Mr. President, I move that we open the period of individual amendments.
Period for individual amendments is in order.
Mr. President, regarding Section 102, definition of terms, this is on page 8, between lines 17 to 18, to insert in the definition of terms of Section 102 a new term, in parentheses, RR, transit bond note, refers to the customs document providing authority for goods to be conveyed in customs transit without prior payment of import duties and taxes, generally containing all the particulars necessary for the assessment, where appropriate, of import duties and taxes, and an undertaking covered by security to produce the goods at the customs office of destination with customs seals intact. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, regarding Section 201, powers and functions of the Commissioner, on page 17, paragraph A of Section 201, in between lines 15 and 16, after the word act and before the word subject, to insert the phrase in collaboration with other relevant government agencies. To read as follows: exclusive and original jurisdiction to interpret the provisions of this act in collaboration with other relevant government agencies, subject to review by the Secretary of Finance. So
Any
moved.
objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, Section 202, Functions of the Bureau, on page 18, line 24, after the word stations, but before the semicolon, to insert the phrase for the protection of government revenue, to read as follows. Letter G, supervision and control on all import and export cargoes, landed or stored in piers, airports, terminal facilities, including container yards and freight stations, for the protection of government revenue. I so move.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, Section 207, Ports of Entry, on page 20, under Section 207, line 12, after the word functions and before the word C, to add the phrase and without hampering business and commercial operations. I so
Any
move.
objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same section, Mr. President, on page 20, under Section 207, line 14, after the word charge, but before the punctuation mark or period, to insert the phrase within a definite period of time, as agreed with private port and airport operators, if any. So move.
Is it definitive or definite?
Within a definite period of time, Mr. President.
Definite period.
Within a definite.
Thank you. Any objection?
Mr. President, Section 211, authority of the district officer to hold the delivery or release of imported goods. On page 21, line 18, after the word thereof, to insert the phrase based on the invoice price or fair market value, whichever is higher, such that Section 211, authority of the district officer to hold the delivery or release of imported goods, shall now read as follows. Section 211, authority of the district officer to hold the delivery or release of imported goods. Except for government importation, the district officer shall hold the delivery of imported or consigned goods to an importer with an outstanding and demandable account with the Bureau. Upon due notice to the importer, the district officer may sell the goods or any portion thereof based on the invoice price or fair market value, whichever is higher, to cover the payment of the outstanding account. And the rest of the provision shall read as it does now, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Section 211, Authority of the District Officer to hold the delivery or release of imported goods. On page 21, line 21, under Section 211, after the word charges, but before the period, to insert the phrase without prejudice to charges and fees due to the port or terminal operator. So move.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, Section 304, Power of the President to subject premises to customs jurisdiction. On page 27, line 19, under Section 304, before the word the, to insert the phrase when public interest requires.
Approved.
So move. Section 304, the same section, Mr. President, on the same page, page 27, line 21, after the word purposes, but before the period, to insert the phrase and/or to authorize a port or terminal operator to transfer overstaying cargoes in an inland depot or terminal. So move.
Approved.
Section 601, Duty and Tax on Goods Intended for Transit. On page 43, to delete the second paragraph of Section 601, Duty and Tax on Goods Intended for Transit, and to add the following: transit goods for consumption shall be subject to a posting of a transit bond note containing all the particulars necessary for the assessment, where appropriate, of import duties and taxes, and an undertaking covered by security to produce the goods at the customs office of destination with customs seals intact. So move.
Approved.
Mr. President, Section 800, Conditionally Free and Duty-Exempt Importation. On page 59, line 11, after the phrase 365 days, to insert the following proviso: provided further that for returning residents who have stayed in a foreign country for a period of less than 5 years, the personal and household effects shall not exceed 150,000 pesos and has not availed of the privilege under this section within 365 days. So move, Mr. President.
Just a matter of style. Shouldn't the phrase "has not availed of this privilege under this section within 365 days" come
Well, subject to style, Mr. President.
subject to style?
Subject
It
to
should
style.
come
Yes.
between years, after 5 years.
Yes, Mr. President. Subject to style.
Subject to
Yes.
style.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, Section 801, Establishment and Supervision of Customs Bonded Warehouse. On page 70, under Section 801, line 15, after the word therein, but before the punctuation mark or the period, to insert the following: in the exercise of the district officer's supervisory functions herein, and the BOC or Bureau of Customs implementation of this chapter, existing contracts of private operators with appropriate government agencies or regulators, such as but not limited to the Philippine Ports Authority PPA, Subic Bay Metropolitan Authority SBMA, and FIVIDEC Industrial Authority PIA, and their respective authorities and powers already granted by law pertinent to such contracts, shall not be impaired or adversely affected. So move. Section 913, Claims for Refund. On page 84, lines 2 and 3, after the word within, to delete the phrase 6 months and to insert the phrase 1 year, such that the first paragraph of Section 913 shall now read as follows: Section 913, Claims for Refund. All claims and application for refund of duties shall be made in writing and forwarded to the Bureau within 1 year from the date of payment of duties and taxes.
Approved.
So move. Section 1111 or 1111, Alert Order. On page 92, line 26, under Section 1111, after the word "or," to delete the words "the suspension of processing of." The amended phrase to read as follows: Section 1111 shall recommend the issuance of a warrant of seizure and detention or the release of the goods by the district officer concerned. So move. On the same section, Mr. President, same page, 92, line 28, after the word "concerned," to insert a new sentence: pertinent clearances or holding or release system of the BOC applying information and communications technology, including electronic documents, online or otherwise, should immediately reflect the imposition or lifting of such orders. So move, Mr. President.
Approved.
Mr. President, Section 1130, Treatment and Disposition of Abandoned Goods, on page 103, line 16, after the phrase other charges, to insert the phrase without prejudice to charges and fees due to the port or terminal operator. So move, Mr. President.
Approved.
Section 1201, Ports open to vessels and aircrafts engaged in foreign trade. This is page 113, Section 1201, line 8, after the word law, but before the period, to insert the phrase provided that no existing and valid government contract covering the handling of import and export cargo shall be diminished or impaired. So move.
No objection here.
Section 1228, Trade Facility for AEOs, on page 126, line 3. After the word agreements, to insert the word and to add a new paragraph C in line 4, which will read, to recognize existing facilities where the authority or right to operate AEOs has been granted by the relevant government agency or regulator through a contract, where the BOC shall A. Only require an endorsement by the relevant agency or regulator, B. Issue a certificate of authority as a matter of course, and C. Ensure that the term of the certificate of authority shall be coterminous with the applicable government contract or any extension thereof. I so move.
Approved.
Section 1601, the appointment and compensation of officials and employees, on page 146, Mr. President, lines 6 to 10, to delete the entire section 1601 and replace with the following. Section 1601, appointment and compensation of officials and employees. All employees of the Commission shall be appointed by the chairperson in accordance with the Civil Service Law, except the private secretaries to the chairperson, commissioners, and directors. The Commission shall be reorganized in accordance with the requirements of its reorganized functions and responsibilities. The chairperson, subject to the approval of the Director General of the NEDA, shall determine the new position designations and salary scale of the officials and employees of the Commission by taking into account the degree of responsibilities of each position, provided that the Office of Compensation and Position Classification shall be furnished a copy of the new plantilla of positions incorporating the new designations, which shall be automatically included in its manual of positions, and provided, however, that the reorganization shall not in any way affect whatever benefits the officials and employees of the Commission are allowed under existing laws and regulations. So move.
The chair has a question.
Yes, Mr. President.
Why should the reorganization be subject to the approval of the NEDA? This is a little unusual. We have the former Director General of the NEDA, and I assume he can. I do not. The chair does not understand why NEDA should approve this when that appears not to be the mandate of NEDA. If at all, it should be DBM.
Mr. President, the approval of NEDA was already in the original provision in the Tariff and Customs Code. We just carried it over, actually.
Should we not review that? 1 minute suspension with the provision of the chamber.
Well, according to the...
I'm sorry.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Okay.
Yeah.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, according to the Director of the Senate Tax Office, the Tariff Commission is under the supervision of the NEDA. Mr. President, we can put this amendment aside in the meantime because we are not going to close the period for amendments. So we can set this aside in the meantime and proceed to the other amendments,
Yes,
if that's
okay.
all right.
Yes, yes, certainly.
Thank you.
The approval of this proposed, committee amendment on section 1601 is tabled to be revisited after we finish all the other amendments.
We will revisit it, Mr. President, with coordination with your office and with the Office of Senator Recto, who was previously NEDA
Yes.
Director General. So if I may move on, Mr. President, to section 1604. assistance to the President and Congress of the Philippines. We set it aside.
Yes, please proceed.
On page 147 to 148 to delete the entire section 1604. So moved, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing approved.
Section 1605, reports of the Commission, on page 148, lines 17 to 26, to amend the second paragraph of section 1605 to be a new section 1606, which now reads as follows. Section 1606, access to documents and assistance to the Commission. The Commission or its duly authorized representative shall have access to any document, paper, or record pertinent to the subject matter under investigation in the possession of any person, firm, co-partnership, corporation, or association engaged in the production, importation, or distribution of goods under investigation, and shall have power to summon witnesses, take testimony, administer oaths, and to issue subpoena duces tecum requiring the production of books, papers, or documents relating to the matter under investigation. The Commission may also request the views, recommendations, and assistance of any government office, agency, or instrumentality who shall be expected to cooperate fully with the Commission. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing approved.
Mr. President, I move to renumber the sections accordingly with the deletion of sections 1604 and the creation of a new section 1606. I so move. Mr. President, I'm done with the individual amendments with the exception of the amendment suggested by the presiding officer that we revisit. And in view of the information we received that some senators still wish to have time to propound their own or to propose their own individual amendments, I thus move that we suspend in the meantime the period.
Before we suspend, the chair would like to hear the views of Senator Recto, being the former Director General of the NEDA, regarding the authority being granted to the NEDA to approve the reorganization of
Yes.
Is this the Bureau, the
Tariff Commission.
Tariff Commission?
Yes. I don't see its place in the Tariff and Customs Code, Mr. President, because I think the reason why it was done there in the first place to begin with was maybe in 1997, there was a reorganization. Maybe in 1997, but not for this purpose today. Because I think that there's no need to reorganize the Tariff Commission right now.
We'll take it into consideration, Mr. President, and we'll definitely give weight to the view of Senator Recto in view of his vast and superior experience on the matter.
So what is the proposal of Senator Recto?
We'll hold it in abeyance, Mr. President. We'll ask the tax office to study it, and let's wait for the other amendments coming from the other senators, Mr. President. I move that we, in the meantime, we suspend the period of individual amendments on this measure.
Period for individual amendments is suspended.
Mr. President.
Yes, Senator.
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. President.
Before we entertain Senator Soto, can we move for the suspension of the consideration of this measure?
I so move for the suspension of the Modernization Act, Mr. President.
I have no objection, although it's quite related.
All right. Consideration of the measure is suspended. Senator Soto is down.
Yes, Mr. President, may we know if the sponsor will request for a clean copy before the final, or shall he wait for the other individual amendments first before we get a clean copy?
I think it's a good idea perhaps to print the clean copy. And
Now.
Yes.
If that's
Before the individual amendments.
Yes, in the next.
if that's the view of the minority
Yes.
leader and the
And
Senate President.
not containing the tabled motion. Of course, not containing the tabled
not
motion.
containing the tabled
Yes.
amendment.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Mr.
Yes.
President.
Thank you.
So the
distinguished-
Secretariat is directed to prepare a new, revised version of the measure under consideration, containing now the amendments introduced by Senator Sani Angara, and distribute this to our colleagues, and this will be the basis of the amendments in the next, when we again consider this measure. Majority Leader,
1 minute suspension, Mr.
1
President.
minute suspension. Ano, thank you.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill 2671. This is entitled An Act Adopting an Omnibus Compensation and Position Classification of Civilian Personnel and the Base Pay Schedule of Military and Uniformed Personnel in the Government and for other purposes under Committee Report number 105. Parliamentary status of this measure is that we are in the period of interpellation. I ask that we recognize the chairperson of the Committee on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation, Senator Antonio Trillanes IV.
Consideration of the measure is in order. Senator Trillanes is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation is in receipt of the following. Senate Bill number 3009, filed yesterday, authored by the Senate President, Franklin Drilon, and Senator Loren Legarda, which is a similar bill pertaining to Salary Standardization Law 4, and Senate Bill number 1645, authored by Senator Vicente Soto III, entitled An Act Requiring Employers to Pay 14th Month Pay with the consent of the body. I move that we take up Senate Bill 2671 under Committee Report 105, taking into consideration Senate Bill number 3009 and Senate Bill number 1645.
No objections, Mr. President.
The
No objections.
all right. The measures are related to each other. Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
Mr. President, I move that we open the period of interpellations.
Period for interpellation is in order. Any member of the chamber who wishes to avail of the period of interpellation?
Senator Recto has indicated he wishes to list, but not on this date, at a future date.
1 minute suspension.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, in view of the manifestation of Senator Recto that he wishes to propound questions at a future date, I move that we suspend we close the period of interpellations, Mr. President.
Approved.
I move that we suspend consideration of the measure, Senate Bill 2983.
Approved.
2671, I apologize, Mr. President. I was reading the wrong. It's Senate Bill 2671
Yes.
for suspension. Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill 2983 under Committee Report 284. Is the bill on forest land limits, Mr. President?
Any objection? Hearing none. In order.
Mr. President, parliamentary status of the measure is that the sponsor delivered her sponsorship speech last November 4, 2015. I thus move that we open the period of interpellations.
Period for, sorry? Period
Interpellations.
For interpellation is in order.
Mr. President, I move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Lauren Legarda.
Senator Lauren Legarda is recognized on the period of interpellation, this principal sponsor. The Minority Leader, Senator Enrile, will avail of the period of interpellation and is so recognized.
Mr. President, I'd like to ask some preliminary questions on this measure. If the sponsor will favor me with some answers.
Yes, Mr. President, we are willing to answer the questions to the best of our ability.
What triggered the filing of this measure?
Mr. President, this was a measure that has been filed in the Senate and the lower house since 15 or 20 years ago. This is in compliance with a constitutional provision on the delineation of forest limits, Mr. President. This is also a bill that has been passed on third reading in the lower house, which has been transmitted to the Senate. And this is in compliance with Section 4, Article 12 of the Constitution, which says that Congress shall, as soon as possible, determine by law the specific limits of forest lands and national parks, marking clearly their boundaries on the ground. And thereafter, such forest lands and national parks shall be conserved and may not be increased nor diminished except by law. So, Mr. President, this is in compliance with that constitutional provision.
Is there no existing law dealing with our forests?
There is none, Mr. President, unfortunately, because insofar as the forest limits or the delineation is concerned, this has been pending since, well, I assumed in 98, since 98, insofar as delineation is concerned.
I think we have a forestry law. This has been going on since the American Governor Generals. What's the basis of the concessions that are being given?
Yes. The forest code is there, Mr. President, but I believe that the delineation of these forest lands is not included in the forestry code.
You ask any forester today, they will tell you that's a forest land.
Yes, Mr. President.
So they know.
Yes.
They know what are forest areas, and they know what are A and D, as they call it, alienable and disposable parts of the public
The
domain.
boundaries. Yes.
So
You're actually correct, Mr. President. The forest lands are identified. But with regards to the specific boundaries, Congress has not complied with that constitutional provision. Because the forest...
How much money are we going to use to do this survey? We are limited. We need money to solve the poverty on the country. We need money to solve the pressing security of the country. We need money to solve the problem of health of the people. And now we are going to undertake a program that may entail a huge amount of money if this is going to be done on a national scale.
Yes. Mr. President, that's a very good question because there is no financial consideration because of the delay of Congress to enact this law. The DNR, under Admin Order 24, since 2008, had already done the guidelines for the assessment and the delineation of such boundaries, meaning that the technical and administrative mechanisms for the assessment, the validation, and the delineation of the boundaries of these forest lands you mentioned and the national parks under the NEPAs of 1992 and the agricultural lands were already delineated. Meaning, Mr. President, the action came ahead of the enactment of the law because there was so much encroachment into forest lands that it was necessary for the DNR to already do the delineation even without the enactment of the law by Congress.
What are we going to do with lands already tilled, already occupied, and in fact many of them are titled already and brought under the torrent system if it's found that these lands are within the forest zone?
I actually have here, Mr. President, a forest land boundary assessment and delineation report where there has been an area which was previously A&D to forest land and forest land to A&D, and this difference signifies, which is this? The difference means the decrease in forest land because they carved out those areas already occupied. In short, Mr. President, there were areas that were already built up, as you said, or encroached upon, and all these years, if not decades, because there was no boundaries, because there was no limitation or delineation, encroachments have been done. And it was only in 2008 and only recently completed, I believe it's completed, no? The delineation that allowed, and this is actually the end result. What I'm holding is the end result of that delineation. So we need not allocate the funds needed because the DNR already had the funds in the previous years and implemented it.
May I request that we study this matter first, because we are passing a law to reclassify our timberlands, and we are making a definition of agricultural lands here, and then terms that are we have. Was this exposed to a thorough study?
Yes, Mr. President.
If this was, excuse me, Madam,
Yes,
if this was proposed 20 years ago,
yes.
what caused the delay? There must have been some problems that were encountered. That's why it has not passed through. You know, once we do this, it will create a social problem in the field.
Mr. President, what caused a delay? I've been here 3 terms, and I've seen this sponsored and never progressed. But it's the first time that the lower house had passed it on 3rd reading. Perhaps it was not made a priority. Perhaps it was not realized that there is indeed a constitutional provision that must be complied with. That could be the possible reasons why it was not enacted into law.
You know, tinkering with our land problems in this country is very dangerous. No? Even in other countries, it can cause a revolution, a social explosion. No? So we have to be very careful here. In fact, Mindanao is a classic case in our country. The source of the problem there is land. Even now, we are discussing what is ancestral lands which are considered lands for the nomads, for the indigenous people, and so forth and so on. And I'm a little afraid that if we're going to just take this matter just like this without studying this law, I must confess that this is the first time that I'm reading this law, and I would like some time to
Yes.
study it.
Of course, Mr. President, I will allow you the time to study it. It's good that we brought it to the table now, and I will not rush this. It's an important matter. While it's in compliance with the Constitution, yes, I would be more than willing to answer your questions when you have read it further, and I will study it further as well.
Yeah, I agree that we have to comply with the Constitution, but in so doing, complying with the Constitution, we might commit a step that is going to be very difficult to reverse. So I suggest that we must give time to at least to some members of the Senate to study this, and we will start debating it after we deal with the budget.
Yes, Mr. President.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2983 under Committee Report number 284.
Consideration of Senate Bill 2983 suspended.
Mr. President, just some administrative matters before we adjourn. In consistency with the other measures on Laglag Bala, the modus operandi previously referred to the Committee on Accountability of Public Officers and Investigations, I move that proposed Senate resolutions 1594, 1635, 1636, 1637, 1641, 1643, 1644, 1645, 1653, and 1662 be secondarily referred to the Committee on Accountability of Public Officers and Investigations. So move.
The Public Services remains the primary committee. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. President.
And the secondary committee is the Blue Ribbon.
Yes, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. So, referred.
Mr. President, with the consent of the concerned committee chairpersons, I move to transfer the primary referral of House Bill 6095 entitled An Act Establishing a Mariculture Development Park located in the municipalities of Carmen, Nasipit, and Buenavista, province of Agusan del Norte, and appropriating funds therefore from the Committee on Public Works to the Committee on Agriculture and Food. I so move.
Approved.
Mr. President, on November 4, 2015, House Bill 6198 entitled An Act Creating the Department of Information and Communications Technology, defining its powers and functions, appropriating funds therefore, and for other. I withdraw the motion, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that Senator Coco Pimentel be made a co-author of the bill on customs modernization and tariff in view of his filing of a bill on the similar topic.
Let the record reflect the co-authorship of Senator Pimentel on
The Customs Modernization and Tariff Act.
Senate Bill number 2968 under Committee Report 264.
Mr. President, there's no other business to transact. I move that we adjourn the session per our agreement on the floor a while ago until 9 o'clock in the morning of Monday, November 23, 2015.
Session is adjourned until November 23, 2015 at 9 o'clock in the morning. Just a reminder,
APEC.
there will be a roll call on that day. Session is so adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. President.